I decided to do my learning contract on how to identify and apply intervention strategies for struggling readers. I'm using a Prezi presentation and Screwnomatic. Since I am mainly a reading teacher in 6th grade, I thought it'd be very beneficial for me to look at different ways to identify and apply certain intervention strategies for struggling readers. First, I will explain a few strategies to help identify struggling readers. Then, I will go briefly in depth over some intervention strategies to implement with these students. Identify struggling readers. Being able to identify students who might be struggling in reading is the first step. Since this is a modified version of a learning contract, I chose only a couple of categories. Two big categories I researched are decoding and comprehension. Looking at decoding first. While looking for a decoding problem, first you would listen to the students and target the students who might be having a hard time sounding out words. Decoding deals with word recognition, such as phonics and phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is being able to hear and manipulate individual phonemes or sounds. A great way to practice this to see if a student is understanding and has phonemic awareness is by rhyming, having students practice rhyming and choosing words that rhyme together. Secondly, fluency. There are 3 things to look for and note while a student is reading to look for fluency. First is accuracy. How accurately are they reading? Second is rate. How fluently and how fast or slow are they reading? And thirdly, prosody. The pitch, tempo, or rhythm at what they're reading. Without these things, it will cause the student to struggle with comprehension. For accuracy, if a student is missing a word or misreading a word, their comprehension might be skewed. As for listening for a student's rate, if a student is reading too quickly or too slowly, they might have a hard time recalling what is happening or what they have just read. If it takes a student 5 minutes to read one page, they're spending so much time trying to decode the word that they cannot read fluently, so the comprehension is just not there. Lastly, if the student has a poor prosody, they might be lacking the expression, making it hard to engage in a book while reading. If they're monotoned, they're not going to buy into it. They're not going to have the expression. They're not going to really get into it and comprehend as much as they really could. Lastly, comprehension. Students who might be having a hard time understanding what they are reading might need help with their academic language. Giving students a brief outline or overview of the vocabulary they're going to encounter will help them understand certain topics. For example, if you're in a biology class and teaching it, you would want to introduce your students to certain biology words that they're going to see so they understand when they get to these big words what they mean, so they don't have to stop in mid-sentence and figure out what that word means. If you go over vocab first, then they have a sense of what's coming up and they can relate to that and put it in perspective of the whole lesson that you're teaching. Comprehension strategies. Comprehension monitoring. If a student is reading or misreading a word and they stop to correct themselves, that is a positive sign of self-monitoring. If a student misreads an important word and doesn't self-correct, a teacher might want to be concerned with that particular student's comprehension. If they're not self-correcting, then you wonder how much they're actually comprehending if they misplace a huge word. A lot of times if a student says a wrong word and keeps reading, they might self-correct themselves because they know that doesn't make sense with what else they're reading. Moving on to intervention and instruction. This must be meaningful to the students. One quote I pulled from Strategies from Struggling Readers is that inadequate intervention results in many students losing interest in school, and repeated failure leads far too many students simply to drop out. I 100% believe in this. Students need to be engaged not only in intervention, but in everyday classroom. Without engagement, they're not really going to buy into it. They don't want to learn then. But if you make it engaging and they want to learn, they're going to stick with it and go very far in life. For the intervention strategies, now I only chose a couple since this was a modified version. I would first say start with a diagnostic test. There are many out there. I have a really great book that I used while I was in school, and I did some with students, and it was really great to target the areas that students needed to work on. First, fluency intervention. Reread passages to gain fluency. Different ways you can do that is echo reading. You can do this with a friend or a parent or a teacher. Being able to hear each other read really helps understand what the passage should sound like, how fluent you need to read to really make sense, and how it flows. Another way is chorus reading. This is when you take turns reading a sentence, a paragraph, a page. So I read some and my student will read some. All of these things can be done at home with a caregiver or a parent or a sibling, and they can also be done in the classroom. Intervention strategies for comprehension. I have a beach ball in my class, and I hadn't used it until just now. What you do is you throw this beach ball around, and on the beach ball are questions such as, what is the main idea? Where does the story take place? Who are the characters? What is the setting? And there's probably 10 different questions. You just throw it around the room, get students engaged, interactive. They can hear each other. They can discuss if they have different opinions. It's really great to involve the whole class instead of just targeting one student for intervention. You can do the whole class as a lesson. Graphic organizers are next. Having students fill out a graphic organizer will not only help me as a teacher, but also the students to visualize what they're thinking about and how they're comprehending or what they're missing out of a story. If we read a story in class and they fill out a graphic organizer, they can also think, pair, and share. So they think about this themselves, they fill it out individually, then they pair with a partner and discuss what main ideas they had, which main ideas they might be missing, and then we share the whole class. So then I can walk around and look at everybody's papers while they're working, listen to them collaborate, and then we can discuss as a whole class to see if anybody had something differently. Lastly is retelling. It's so important to be able to retell a story. Being able to recall certain details is huge. It's not only in reading, but in everyday life. There's so many retelling activities a teacher can do. For example, recreating a scene by acting it out is a great way to get students involved and thinking about what they just read. Also, writing a story. If you give them a line from the story and have them tell me what's going to happen next, that's a great way for comprehension and retelling. Lastly is drawing a story. Drawing pictures with a story. Oftentimes, I've been using this a lot in my own classroom, is I'll give them either a writing prompt or they can draw a picture or draw a comic. This reaches more than just one learning preference. And it's a great way to understand their comprehension, what they're learning. I had a sense of fluency and comprehension in what I could do, but it wasn't until this project that I opened a few books that I used while I was an undergrad. With more knowledge, I'm excited to apply what I have learned, and I actually have already done this in my classroom the end of last week and the beginning of this week. So it's been a great learning experience, and I'm excited to dig deeper into strategies to help my struggling readers.